This video will show you how to use scanner to read data input from user keyboard. Right, user enter input from keyboard, right? And we already learned from the last chapter 1.1 how to display, right, the message to console, right, which is like a dot screen, right? Now we know that we have so many type of data in the world that we have to read it. It could be a string. String is a Java word representing a word or statements. Like when it say hello world, I put in double quote, that is a string. In Java, when we're dealing with string, we put double quotes, right? That is string type. A word or phrase or any statements, that's string. It could be numbers. We have primitive data types in Java, like it could be an integer. Integer is a whole number, we call int. It could be short, it could be byte. Let's say we start with byte. We know that from introduction 1.1, 1 byte has how many bits? 8 bits. If I have 8 bits, how many values I can represent? We talk about it has to be 2 to the exponents of 8, right? So 2 to the 8. Let's do 2 to the 8. So we said that 256 values. And I'm dealing with numbers, right? Number in the real world, we have what? Positive and negative numbers, right? So how are we going to represent both positive and negative numbers? We pretty much just want to split half as a negative, divide by 2, and half of this as a positive. So the maximum, the lowest number of negative number is going to be minus 128. And the maximum is going to be positive 127. Because 0, right? That make it 256, right? So if I said I declare a data type we used to declare, like in math, we pretty much just say x equals to 5, right? But in Java, you have to tell a type. Are you using byte is the x, or like if I type in Notepad? In math, we said x equals to 5. It's simple because we know a number and human know, but computer they never know. You have to give me the size because computer is the limit, right? We have the limit resources, bit and byte in the computer. So if I want the byte, computer is going to allocate a portion of your memory when you buy your iPhone 128 megabyte, 16 gigabyte, right? So that's the limit. So it's going to take 8 bits of that, right, to store the values that you want. So I have to say like byte x equals to 5, something like that. And in the statement semicolon, that's a syntax in Java. Like int gear equals to 1. Gear is pretty much just a variable name. Like this, a variable name is x. And give the type. Then we know that the max number positive of x is 127. You cannot go over that. Like this could be a good thing when you talk about like human age, right? It's possible that I think there's no human older than 128. So if you want to store that human age, right? But if you want to talk about something else, then you have to see the size of the data. So that's why we have to distinguish the data that we're reading in. So short, same principle. Short is 16 bits. Okay? Byte we know is 8 bit. short is 16. It's just a new word, but it's going to represent 16. And this is for the whole number. Again, like numbers running between, same principle. You can just say 2 to the 16. Let me clear. 2 to the 16. You can get 65,536 divided by 2. That minus 32,768 to 32,767. Correct? Now let me show you one thing. If I just do, if you look at that divide by half, it's just like what we said, 16-bit. If I do 2 to the 15, we will get 32,768 too, because we divide by half. So that means if I'm dealing with int is what, 32-bit, I can just abbreviate it to minus 2 to the 31 to 2 to the 31 minus 1 because of 0, right? So that's a range that you can represent. It's about 4,000 millions divided by half, 2,000 million something, minus 2,000 million to positive 2,000 million. Now if you're dealing with the data that no bigger than 2 million, 2,000 million, then you can use int. If you're dealing with data no bigger than 32,767, then in this range just use short. Why? You don't have to waste your spaces. Right? It means something. If you just declare a lot of spaces in your apps and it's occupied your phone memories, then you pretty much just don't like to keep that apps, right? Because occupy too much memory. So that's something that we have to think about. And we also have long. Long is 64 bits, so it's going to be in this range. Okay? Minus 263 to 263 minus 1. So these are all for whole number. Now if you're dealing with decimal points or decimal numbers with the period, right? After that, with the decimal places, we have float. Float is about 32-bit. Okay. Now the standard that we use, you can research some more, and we cover this in CSC200. How machine understand decimal numbers is under standard IEEE 754. Okay, that they use. But at this point, you just know that 32-bit, pretty much you have more decimal places than 16-bit and so on. And they don't use 16-bit for decimal numbers anymore. They just use float at the minimum. But they use double if you're dealing with, if you want more decimal places after the decimal point, more than 32-bit, you can have 64 bits. Okay? And we have another one which is Boolean. Data can be just true or false or 0 or 1. This is just 1 bit. We just say Boolean. And the characters, and we learned that in ASCII table, right? And ASCII we also talk about Unicode if we want to represent the international alphabets. And this is use 16-bit Unicode. Okay, and this is /U stand for like Unicode, and this is your hexadecimal numbers, right? The nibble, which is each digit, represent 4 bits, 4 of them 16 bits, and we talk about that, right? Like if you look at 0041, that should be capitalized A, right? If you remember Unicode, we can look at it again. Alright, capitalize A, 004 and 1, right? 004 and 1. So that is the characters. So it's going to occupy 16-bit. Then you can store a characters. Data could be a character input, right? Could be in numbers, could be decimal, could be just a true or false or bit. So they just try to distinguish the data in the world when you try to put in the input here. We need to know the type. Now, when you look at the defaults, if you declare byte without giving the values, like this, if I say byte age, it's going to be 0 as the values as default. Short 0, int 0, long 0 with it. L is just try to say this is the long type. You see this on your test. Like 0.0f is the float type. 0.0d is the double type. And this is for the Unicode. And Boolean is always false by default. Right? Unless you state that if you declare like Boolean, let's say is just one variables, right? Let me name something class over equals to true, something like that. Is true or false, right? But if I don't say true, by default it's going to be false. Class is not over yet. That's just the variables to store the value, right? Now, how about string? So additional to the 8 primitive data types, we have 8 of them. You need to remember those. This will be on your test, right? Java programming language provides special support for a string. String is a class. String, like the word that we type, this is a string. You can just say string s equals to when you declare that. Okay, and put the values to it. Or if you don't put the value, it's going to be a null. Null is like an empty. Nothing. Not even like empty string, it's just nothing in there. Okay? So this is how you declare and use them. An example, right? Boolean. Characters. Character, we're going to use a single quote. You see this single quote right there, dash. Right. Byte, we know that 100 is fine because max is 127, right? Short in, like you try to put 10,000 into byte B, it's going to be a problem. It's going to show syntax errors because it cannot store the values. Too big for byte. And this is for hexadecimal, decimal numbers, right? With the decimal points double. You can do E stand for like 10 to the power of 2 for exponents, right? Float, we just say F, this is the float values. Okay? This is to show you more. You can store like the hexadecimal numbers by put 0x in front. Float F, L long for social security number, credit card number. We can use those long. Right. Alright, now you can just read this on as part of your reading assignment. So once we understand the data, let's understand what we try to do with this program. We said we want to learn how to input the data, and this is the data for the name. Enter my name and go say hello my name as the output. So what's the data type then? Name should be a string, right? The character is just a letters. So I can say string name, and I can just make a default is null, right? So declaring this in order to prepare to read. This is just a variable's name.